Peace. Peace. Ashay.
Peace. Greetings, brother.
How y'all doing? How y'all doing?
Doing great. How are you doing?
I'm all right, sister. I'm all right, man. I'm all right. Feel good to be here, and no doubt about that.
That's what's up. This is the winner's circle, and congratulations on your win.
Appreciate
Do you want to tell us about your opponent?
that. Oh, my brother King J. Um, yeah, my brother King J over at the HOK. You can catch sometime catching over at Titan. Formidable opponent nonetheless. But it's just this time he stepped on the wrong side. He stepped on the side of the pseudo killers and and he made a dangerous mistake with making the statement inside him that there was no such thing as African science, stating that science is only universal and that there's no specificness to it.
Hmm. So, speaking of universal, what makes something scientifically African instead of universal? Excuse me.
Right. Great question. Great question. Now, it's the cultural aspect of it. It's the cultural exclusivity of the scientific method that's being utilized. Depending on where you're at, for instance, when we was in a debate, I referenced Suburu Cave. In Suburu Cave, this is one of our, if not our oldest observation of people, and these are hunter gatherers I'm talking about over 200,000 years ago, utilizing pesticides, natural pesticides. Now, if they were not in the location that they were in, they would not have been privy to those plants. They would not have been privy to that fungi to lay that down in their bedding. So when we're dealing with African science versus universal science, yes, you have universal understandings. Absolutely. Universal science, they definitely are there. But when we have this conversation about African science, we're talking about sciences that we see developed exclusively in Africa, mastered in Africa, and then we even see certain practices like what we see with the Nzinga people in the rings that they put around their neck. African exclusive ritualistic practice that goes into the scientific arena when we're dealing with the understanding of anatomy as well. For they had to have a certain way of putting these rings on their neck to prevent their vertebrae from collapsing. I showed that the difference between the rings that they put around their necks and when you go into Asia and you have the Kanyan people who are trying to emulate a similar practice, but their women are suffering from collapsed vertebrae because they don't
Mm.
understand the scientific method to properly do the ritualistic practice.
So, can science have a cultural identity or is it objective?
Yes, culture. Science can have a cultural identity, absolutely. Because what my opponent and a lot of others do in this Black conscious community do is they try to pigeonhole what science is and what science is not. Cooking is, you can look this up. Everybody at home, is cooking science? Is cooking a science? And the answer is always going to be yes. So if you have things like Mediterranean food, Mexican food, African food, they're dealing with different spices. See, one of the earliest sciences that we had was agriculture, right? We had the
Right.
early farmers, things of that nature, going all the way back to ancient Kemet. Your Hebrew, the Israelites did it. All of your antiqual cultures did it, right? So it's gonna, and that's gonna start with your vegetation and the things that you're growing out of the ground. So what you're growing out of the ground and things of that nature is going to go to what you're actually putting inside of your body. So yes, there is a such thing as cultural identification when it comes to science.
So, what is the oldest example of African science you can point out?
It would have to be Nabdaplaya. probably almost hands down. Not the playa, that's going all the way before the pre-dynastic times in ancient Kemet. And that's older than Stonehenge, you know, and this is it's Stonehenge like cosmological structure to read the astronomy, to read the astrology. I apologize, not astronomy. Astronomy comes after astrology. So I would have to say Nabta.
Okay. So, does it include documented procedures or just outcomes as far as this not to, how do you pronounce that?
Nabta.
Okay.
Nabta doesn't, but what I did show within my debate was that we can look at like the Edwin Smith Papyrus in ancient Kemet, where it's actually dealing, which is our first triage system ever. And you know, triage is when you go into the hospital and they give you your prognosis, diagnosis, and things of that nature. So they even talked about if I can treat this or if I cannot. That's how they were ranged from treatable to untreatable. And of course, there was a median. So that's what we do have, and that was documented, where they would document the injuries. They would document the result of the injuries, and if there was a cure possible, and if it was able to be treated, then of course treatment was done. And if it was not to be treated, like you had one in there, it speaks about an individual with a massive blow to the head, where this individual was experiencing paralysis, and they're breaking down how this individual was shaking and the things that the eyes are doing, letting you know that this guy's basically finished. There's nothing that I can do about this. So that was documented, but not the playa. That's way before writing.
So these documents, were they preserved? And what
Yes,
language were they preserved in?
they were preserved in the hieratic. They were preserved in the hieratic. Hieratic is the writing system, is the writing of the hieroglyphics. You know what I'm saying? So this is in ancient Kemet, of course, and this was written on papyri.
Okay. And can modern scholars interpret that text consistently?
Yes, they have. Actually, when I went into the debate, we showed how they have put the Edwin. You can view the Edwin Smith Papyrus on PubMed.com. That's just how deep it is. So that institution, that medical institution, recognizes the Edwin Smith Papyrus and the Ebers Papyrus as scientifically accepted, documented, antiquatal not medicinal knowledge, medical knowledge.
And that's the hieratic script?
Yes, that'll be the hieratic script.
All right. Outside of the hieratic script, how was knowledge passed?
Of
And
course,
if
you
it
got
was oral, how do we ensure accuracy over time?
well, of course you have oral. Everything will have to start off oral. That's just what we do know. But we don't really bank our understanding off oral traditions. We bank our understandings off of what we see documented and replicated. Now, what funny thing about oral tradition though is that in the debate we had the Tanzanian, I believe it was Tanzania. Yeah, the Tanzanian furnaces, and they would burn in these furnaces. They were able to build not because they had a layout in the blueprint, but based off their oral tradition. Now this was crazy. They were able to preserve engineering through oral tradition, going all the way back to hunter-gatherer times. These people were able to build furnaces, you know. And actually, fun fact about these African furnaces is that when they did the field study, they burned hotter than the ones that they observed in the ancient Levantine and in ancient Mesopotamia, showing a certain level of maybe primal or even origin or origin and originalness to these Tanzanian furnaces. But other than that, what we do observe, like through the Edwin Smith Papyrus, Ebers Papyrus, is that this was written. Everything else, you get the metal netcher, which is hieroglyphics and things of that nature. But a lot of that was just spirituality. They're not science.
Mm. Hmm. So, in regards to African science, is it tied to location, people, method?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Diff- Different locations. See, this is where the ethnography comes in as well, where we're talking about and the ethno botonomy as well, when we're talking about the plant life and the way that you incorporate in the plants, going back to that conversation, always depending on where you at, so that location is vital. If you're in Africa, you're not dealing with peyote and agave. If you're in Mexico, you're not dealing with what was it called? You're not dealing with cypress woody, which they found in Subudu Cave. So of course that's going to play a big difference. Now the people, depending on what you're preserving in your tribe, may be different. Like with the oral, as far as the oral tradition and the treating of the furnace, that can be different. Everybody's not going to be able to just come into a land and do the same thing that other people are doing on the land. Going, we can observe that also with over here in the Americas. You know, they had to go to the Native Americans and the Indians, whatever you would like to call them, and get the agricultural understanding from them. Just because they was on this land, the European, the colonizer, does not mean that he knew what to do with the plants and the grains and things of that nature over here in this land. So the people
True.
does play a large role because they had that cultural identity and cultural continuity with the environment that they're in.
Mm. I have to write that down. Surprised you used that cultural identity. So, let me ask you some easy questions in regards to this debate.
No doubt.
Do you feel that you came to dominate or educate?
No, that's not an easy question. Both. um, I'm always here to educate, but if you put me in a debate, I'm here to dominate at that point. So more than educate, because I'm going to be educational anyways. I'm always here to dominate my opponent. This is how debate should always be ran. You should always be there to dominate them. Even you may even be losing a debate. If you are able to dominate in there, though, even if you might be a little wrong and your facts might not be all the way right, even though mine were, you if you dominate, you can still come out victorious in a debate. So I'm always there to dominate.
Okay. Um, what do you feel your opponent underestimated about you?
My understanding of Africa, my understanding of the actual cultural practices of the Africans. A lot of times, this is what they do, and it's lazy for these atheists to do so because they don't care for the spirituality. They don't care to understand the spiritualities and the religions. They just throw it out the way and say, "Oh, that's religious, so I don't care about it." But what they'll be surprised to observe is, especially when you look into things like ancient Kemet, ancient Mesopotamia, when you go into these quote unquote gods, air quotes that everybody likes to call them, they are actually representation of forces of nature. So if you're not observing nature, if you're not observing your environment, you will never have an understanding of this quote unquote spirituality and religion of of old. You know what I mean? Tiamat is not a just a dragon in a story. Tiamat was a representation of salt water. And then she has Apsu, the fresh water. You get what I'm saying? This is representations of nature, primordial waters of noon. But when you're talking about noon, we're talking about the sky, the waters above, going to the Babylonian cosmos. Why do we say waters above when are the clouds not filled with water? You get what I'm saying? So it's these type of levels of understanding that I think he really thought I didn't know. I think he thought I was just a spiritual spook.
So is spirituality required for your system?
No, absolutely not. And that's their problems. They think spirituality dismisses the science done. If I do an operation on you right now, documented in the Eber's papyrus or something like that, right? Just theoretically speaking. And I put a prayer, or what they like to call it now because of the European wrote over it, a spell on the top of it. Does that take away the surgery that I did on you? If I plant my plants on the ground and I water them and do everything I'm supposed to do according to the scientific method of growing plants, but I do a little prayer over my joints, does that take away the science that I laid down? Does that take away me planting and watering and caring and providing them with the proper sunlight so they can go through the photosynthesis and things of that nature? Does that take that away? No. But spirituality is not required. So you can do all those things and not pray. You can do all of these things that I explained within the debate and not have no God involved and attached to it. Matter of fact, fun fact about my whole debate was nothing spiritual came about except for the treating of the furnace like a womb, which I just look at more of like an analogy than actual like true spirituality. Because if I treat you like a diamond, I think that's more like a metaphor. You get what I'm saying? So I don't even think that was just truly spiritual.
Mm. So, what's one example people can actually test or observe based on your system?
The Tanzanian furnaces, that's the earliest, that's the latest one because that field test was done in the 90s, I believe. Were rather recent though, so somewhere in the 19th century for sure. And they went in and they went to Tanzania and they asked these people to build a furnace. Like we heard it that y'all got the quote unquote best furnaces and they burn the hottest, and y'all have a certain type of technique that y'all do that ain't nobody else doing. Can y'all do that for us? And the people, I showed this in the debate, they were able to just make these furnaces on the spot. So of course when the um when the um when the anthropologists and things of that nature were there observing this is one of the things that they were able to document and have replicated in front of their very own eyes. And of course, cooking as well, but that was at the end.
I'm definitely gonna look into that because I was unaware of this the Tanzania furnace because I'm
Hmm.
trying to write this down as you answer these questions. But I doubt that anyone can practice like in America in today's modern with today's modern conveniences and build something like that as the people of Tanzania.
I don't see a necessity for it, but if they can do it, why can't we? They're not aliens. You get what I'm saying?
I get
If
it.
they're able to replicate this throughout their oral tradition and do this generationally, then just the way that they learned, they could teach you as well.
So would you say that critics misunderstand you, or do they try to expose real gaps in your system?
They misunderstand me. They don't understand me. And that's the thing, actually. I don't think it's a misunderstanding. I just think they don't care to understand. A lot of people, I think they criticize me because they're not the ones bringing it out. And that's not me tooting my own horn or anything like that. But a lot of times, majority of the time, when you fact check me, I'm not telling you a lie. And I'm not just telling you things off of my own accord. I'm usually sharing my screen, giving a presentation with sources back behind me, like literally every point that I had in the debate, we were able to click and go to respectable, peer-reviewed sources to support everything that I said. Not just 1 point, not just 2 point, not just 3 point, but every point that I said had a respectable source attached to it. Majority PubMed, actually.
So, as far as your the scholars that you reference, can you name 5 of them off the top of your head?
Absolutely not. No. Because a lot of them was just PubMed. A lot of it was just PubMed. We did talk about Johann Blumenbach, though. We talked about the father of gynecology. What's his name? The quote unquote father of gynecology, air quotes again. I forget his last name as well. I think it was Sims. I forget. It starts with an S though. No, I don't remember a lot of their names.
Okay. So, what makes your position valid today?
It's just the re-understanding for those who didn't understand that there is a such thing as African science. I think when we try to take away those aspects, and I'm not, I want everybody to understand, I'm not saying this because I'm black. I gotta say that because a lot of people are like, man, he's black, so of course he's pro-African and da-da-da. But no, Africa is the start of all civilization. So like, I had a great slide coming from Professor Mbenga, I believe his name was, and from Wits University. And he was going in on what was his statement was that who are the original scientists if not the hunter-gatherers?
Pollock's?
Oh, and of course, that's in Africa. So if we looking at the very genesis of the scientific method, if we're looking at the very genesis of agriculture, if we're looking at the very genesis of pesticide, we're looking at Africa. So if we want to have these type of discussions about science and the genesis and the beginning of science and try to just delegate all of that to quote unquote modern science and this universal understanding, like that takes away and that robs the continent of Africa from its inventions. It robs Africa of its scientific genesis that it has. It takes that away. It takes away from the cultural. It takes away from the scientific cultural understanding that the peoples were able to preserve. That's the problem that I have when you just try to make it all universal. That's like saying every human is the same. Every person is the same because we're all human beings. No, there's diversity. So we can't just pigeonhole science the way that these guys are trying to do it. It never worked like that. It never worked like that. There is exclusivity just as quick as there is universal understanding. Some things are universal, some things are exclusive and cultural. And just because I started it and it begins with me, don't mean that you can't do it too. I don't want you to think that. Just because Mexicans make Mexican food does not mean that Samaria cannot make a Mexican dish, right? You can share that culture. See, that's what they don't understand. They think that when I say African culture, that it's just purely to the Africans, and the Africans is tucked away in Africa with it, and can't nobody else got it. No, because when we're talking about science and in the scientific endeavor and humanity, this is to be shared and spread amongst these hunter gatherers. And just stay in Africa. They went all around the world. They travel all around the world according to evolution and science. Everything started in Africa, and from Africa, everybody left, and they populated the rest of the world, right? So
Hmm.
yeah, you got to share it. It's to be spread. It's to be shared, but put some respect on the origin of this stuff.
So, does your framework operate the same as modern standards or differently?
Yeah, it operates under the yes. Actually, it does because it's still utilizing the scientific method. You observing, you giving your diagnosis, you got your prognosis, you got your conclusion, you have your ability to replicate it. You have the false effect, you have the falsibility and everything that I'm saying. That's why I didn't come in and hone in on African spirituality, if you would. I talked about pure technological advances that utilize the scientific method. So it's the same scientific method we got now. It didn't change. Like my opponent even said in debate, science isn't a what. It's not a win. It's a what. You get what I'm saying? So if you're looking at by the definition of it, it can't change according to modern. No. If we're talking about proto science, proto is just dealing with the prime dealing with the first, with the original set. But these guys, they mix up definitions and they mix up understandings. So that's why I was there to actually right that wrong. It's the same thing. It's just done by antiquity people on the continent of Africa.
I'm definitely going to use Africa's scientific genesis. I don't think I've heard that before.
Mhm.
But so what does this victory prove to the audience?
That it's a lot of guys out here that are advocating for the Eurocentric way of thinking when it comes to science. That it's a lot of guys out here who are not even studying the culture and the history of Africa. It's a lot of guys out here who don't respect our ancestors, who don't respect the African scientific genesis that took place with these original peoples. It's they want to give it all to the European. They even now going as far as to saying that science didn't start until the European came and brought and defined the word and all of that. Like that's what they're doing now. So I think that this was a victory for the Black conscious community as a whole, not just for Ashe Wasir, not just for Bomb Squad Ashe, no, not just for me, but for us all, for African people as a whole. Because where did when you even talking about over here, and all of the scientific advancements that happened over here in the Americas, that happened largely in part due to the quote the African slave trade, the bringing of these Africans, and then them having a time to adjust to the land that they were on over here. And just look what we did. I could have defeated my opponent solely using post transatlantic slave trade Africans. How about that? How about that? I could have talked about George Washington Carver if I really wanted to. We talking about African people. Talking about African. And what were they doing before the introduction of the African over here? Take away the African from over here, and what does this landmass even look like? Riddle you that. Gotta be something called African science. Because we bring it, baby. We sure bring it.
So What did it feel like walking out of the HOK Coliseum with that win?
Justified. Not even surprised. I felt like that's where I'm supposed to be. I never when I used to watch Polite, when I used to watch the Imam Bashir's, even Brother Ankh a little bit, Young Pharaohs of the World, Brother Inky's, Dr. Inky. Uh, I knew I fit up there. Like not even being funny. Like I was like, man, I could do that, man. Like I'd go up there and I'd dominate too. Like I'd be one of the ones because I always had an intellectual prowess. So it just felt normal. It felt right. It felt like the type of space that I'm supposed to be in and doing what I'm supposed to do. It felt like Kobe Bryant or LeBron James with a basketball walking out of their first NBA game. Like, yeah, I always knew I'd be here. It was just a matter of time, and not just being here or walking away with a dub. I ain't out here embarrassing myself, putting out pseudoisms and crazy stuff like that.
I would have thought it was part of the culture once upon a time when
Yeah,
you could be seen with, the young men speaking amongst the wise men, those doctors of the law and everything. It was once a culture. But
I agree.
you ended up with some bad apples along the way. But I think we already went over as far as the role that spirituality plays in the practices.
Yeah, yeah. We
Um,
kind of touched on that.
because you have so is there any science applied to African spirituality?
Absolutely, I broke that down. Um, I love the Netcheru, but I love the original Netcheru though. And when I say original Netcheru, I'm talking about the Ennead and below. So we talking about those original ones. And I really don't even like to talk about the whole Ennead. I really like to talk about just the primordial ones, the complete embodiments of nature. And that's going to be your Raz, that's going to be Geb, that's going to be Shu, Tefnu, Neith. That's going to be them. So within that, you're going to have a certain level of nature. You're going to have a certain level of the understanding of what's going on. Even Kefir, dealing with the Kefra beetle when the rolling of the dung early in the morning. Then you see the representation of that, and they put the Kefira rolling. Because it almost looks like it's rolling the dung on the horizon line, if you would. That's how it looks. So what they did was they took away the dung and they put the sun. So they was almost saying like you can see the Kefir beetle rolling the sun up into the morning time. So you see this spiritual breakdown, but they have this certain level of observational understanding from the environment and the animals and insects, things of that nature that they're around, that they then applied within a spirituality. You go into Anbu, they had to observe the jackal's tendencies to bury their dead in far away places and then be able to go track that dead even days away. They buried the rabbit 3 days ago. 3 days later, it had been all around the Sahara and all of this came back to that exact same spot, dug him up because you remembered it. So because of that, they okay. When we put that in our spirituality, we go give certain aspects of that jackal onto this understanding, to the Anbu or the Anubis, if you would, the guide to the underworld. You get what I'm saying? So they had to.
Mm.
That's the application of your observation of the environment around you. This is very scientific.
So, do you find it disrespectful for archaeologists to go and disturb those pharaohs?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I would no disrespect, but wouldn't you find it very disrespectful if I dug up your grandma and
Absolutely.
and she had precious pearls and she had precious jewelry that your family worked their ass off, excuse my language, for. And then I come on and I take that off of your grandma's neck and I put that on some site and I sell I sell the jewel that you intended to send your grandmother off with for $5,000 on a local site. Like, that's extremely disrespectful.
I agree. So, it looks like you've answered all of my questions.
Mm.
Now, as far as African science, the only thing because I just did a quick look into it, and that was the African Science Academy, which is all girls.
Mm.
The African University of Science and Technology, founded in 2007, and the Pan African Conference, 1900, for Negro peoples.
Mm. If I was you, damn, I really wish I had my laptop charged up. Give me 2 seconds. I'll give you a source from from the actual debate itself. Give me 3 seconds.
Okay.
I would I one I have was from which university of Dr. Fayola. Faola. Fayola.
Okay.
And then he should have some information. You look up African science in Dr. Fayola next to it. He should have his lecture from which university on there.
Is any other
Yep.
doctors you recommend?
Other than Fayola.
Mm-hmm. Is Dr. Sebi African?
No, he's Honduran. You hear me?
Okay.
He's a Honduran. But then we also have Dr. Asante as well. Mukeli Asante. We have him. We got anthropologist Louis R. Benford as well. We had references from his book, from his work about the hunter gatherers, the science of tracking. Oh, I almost forgot about that. Tracking is a science. If you're out and imagine me and you was out hunter gathering, we in Tickle folk, and we need to eat. We gotta hunt it down. We gotta know what they had, what they recorded was, because hunter gathering ain't died either. Don't think that there are still not hunter gatherers around. And what they did was they examined the way that they would do their hunts. They would have to track the specific beast, the specific prey of the day. So one of my sources, they talk about the kudu chase. they would have to observe the dung of the kudu, observe the hoof size of the kudu, the distance, so they would the distance in the hoof prints, so they would know if the kudu has been chased by another predator, so they could know if it was running or not, observing the distance in the prints, rather than if one was walking. You get what I'm saying? Like, if and they also understood the way that the kudu grazed for when it was wet, and when it was wet out, the kudu they would have to go into the lowlands. I mean, the high where the grass would grow higher, so they can get to the vegetation, where in regards to the lower vegetation was submerged in the water, so the kudu would not graze there. So they knew not to hunt for the kudu there as well. And they also understood that when it was rainy out, it was the best time to also chase the kudu, because the hooves of the kudu would sink deeper into the mud because of the weight of it, of course, being over 1,000 pounds. And you a hunter gatherer, you about 150, 220, about that's about maxing out for them. So you out there, you way more light on your feet than that kudu. He's sinking all in that mud. So this is things part of the scientific method that goes into tracking. Lewis R. Benford, The Science of Tracking. That comes from that book.
I definitely wrote that down too. Are you familiar with the Convention of the Negro Peoples of the World, 1922?
The Convention of the Negro Peoples across the world. No.
Well, in that time they used a lot more Negro than they used any color.
No doubt.
Colorism hadn't really kicked in until the 1960s. But let's see. And that pretty much concludes all the questions. You answered them. I definitely took notes. You did very well. I was impressed with a couple of your answers, especially the Africa scientific genesis. I think that's been omitted from history, and it's been a disservice to Africa in its existence, primarily since 1914. It seems to have been one cover up after the other. And you're right about as far as the respect goes, it's been blatant disrespect.
Absolutely.
Blatant disrespect.
And another big part, and I don't mean to cut you, but another big part that happened in the debate that I noticed, and they didn't understand why I did it, was when I showed the pseudoscience of the European institutions. How, oh my God, how when you go into it, Europeans have a science. Well, they had a science. It died off. It was being pseudoscience, but they had a science. Europeans had a science, and they was the only ones with it. Johann Blumenbach, Carl Linnaeus, who created race. He created the term race as we know it, and he even created the races of man as well. Josiah Priest backs him on this. Blumenbach backs him on this. So this is all European pseudoscience at the time, and it's accepted by the scientific institution, by the modern scientific institution that at that time was the authority. So what's coming through there is a whole lot of racist craziness. Things like we had what was his name? I forget his name. Morton was his last name. And he was observing the skulls. See, watch this. This is how Europeans had a science that they was utilized and they accepted, but it was crazy BS. He was observing African skulls versus Indo-European skulls. And he said because the African skulls were smaller, that they had a smaller brain capacity, therefore that they were inferior to Europeans. Craziness. This was accepted. Now, you couldn't go to India with that. You couldn't go to, you sure as hell couldn't go to Africa with that type of teaching. Like, not to no indigenous people, not with some type of militia or military, not without a militia or military behind you. Now, if you come with them guns and you got all that power, you can tell people anything that you want to. And that's how they impose Christianity and all these other things on the people. But you couldn't, the way that they just let it fly over here, it wouldn't have flew over there. So what happens, what else do we get from this racist European scientific institution? Because if there is a such thing as European science, then why can there not be a such thing as African science? I want you to observe the disrespect. So you have this, the father of gynecology. Like I said, I forget his name. I believe his last name was Sims. He comes out and he says that black women don't feel pain. This is what he says. This is the statement that black women don't. So what he did with his slaves was he operated on them without any anesthesia, and he did gruesome operations on these black women. He gets coined and deemed, and he got a statue. They just removed it recently, thank God. But he had a statue for all these years, and he's deemed as the father of gynecology. Wow. Now, as a black woman, and I showed this in a debate, it's that they took that thought and they still apply it today. I showed the PubMed article where they actually observed that black women and children are going into the ER with the same complaints as European women and are given significantly less anesthesia than their European counterparts. How does that make you feel, host, as a black woman?
I'm disturbed. It makes me feel like I'm treated more like a god than a human. But it's still disturbing that they continue to test us.
Test on us at that.
Yeah.
You know. So same institution. Oh, I apologize. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just thinking about the Tuskegee. Yeah,
Tuskegee experiments.
Tuskegee Airmen. But you had the experiments that they were running on the daughters of this continent and getting away with it. Most of it ended up in forced sterilization.
Absolutely. Yeah. And didn't even know. And they told these same institution told this melanated populace that they were going to be vaccinated. They were going to be treated. These men walked away and were not able to even have children. These women walking away not able to have children.
Yeah.
Think about that. This same institution. This is the same institution. Yeah. This same scientific institution develops eugenics. I brought that out in the debate. And eugenics was taught where? At the most respected institution here in America, Harvard University. They taught eugenics. This was accepted to a point. You know what that mean? That mean if you wasn't rocking with eugenics, you wasn't seen as you were seen as probably scientifically inferior.
So how do you feel about Martin Luther King assisting in manifesting that document?
Great question. I believe, unfortunately, Dr. King played, if he was not purposefully, he unconsciously did it for sure. The agent coming from the word agenda, where he served an agenda for the European to not just only intermingle with us, but reestablish domination on us as well. So I don't really stand with Dr. King as much as a lot of people do for my overstanding of his impact on where we are today.
Um, this might be a little off this topic, but do you
No,
think
we're good.
that Jeffrey Dahmer read the book The Delectable Negro?
Woo! Hoo, hoo, hoo. Damn, damn, damn. Because yeah, not and correct me if I'm wrong, but all of his victims were melanated, correct?
Yes.
Oh my god. You see, he got me scratching my head at home because that's a whole other aspect that's deep, like that's super deep for real. But like now that you say it like that, to answer your question, yes, he had to. He almost had to because there's really no way. Like you just start doing that, and then you targeting these men. And it was the thing about the delectable Negro, and if you study psychology, you notice as well. A lot of times when somebody is outside of your race and your culture, we kind of start to devalue them as people. Some naturally, people don't want to accept that. But like that, like unfortunately, that's like a human reaction sometimes, where humans have a tendency to treat other humans like less than humans. That's happened throughout the course of history. They didn't just start with white folks. Let's not act like that. So yeah, I
Are
think
you
it was that understanding. I apologize. I think it was that understanding that he had, maybe that people who were not of him and didn't look like him were a little bit less than human, to a point that they fell under the category of beast like. And if you are a beast like a bison, like a cow, or things of that nature, you're on the menu. And the delectable Negro doesn't do nothing but appropriate those behaviors.
you know with certain historical texts revealing the primitive Christians were definitely into cannibalism.
Mm,
I think there's just something to all this cannibalism in this religious text. Um, with the
mm,
sciences applied to these acts and these gods of the old world, um, but the Christians were definitely guilty of their primitive holy meals being human flesh and other elements.
mm, mm. Um, no, that I really, for me to speak on it in too much depth, I couldn't really do. I know within their text it speaks about how they were, of course, cooking babies, and you got Christ really is giving us the layout of a vampire, if you would, where no, like literally, he's telling you to drink his blood and you'll like live forever and all of that stuff. Like if he converts you, if he bites you, and you become like what he is, you'll live forever and you won't age, kind of like a vampire and stuff like that. Um, it just gives you that type of feel. It has that type of feel to it. The sun coming back, burning up individuals. It has that very type of vampiric feel. And to understand where it's developed as well. Rome. You're dealing with Romania, all of these things. So like, watch what you're dealing with.
Mm.
Gotta watch what you're dealing
So
with.
with with the evidence of this practice, when it comes to Paul, for example, when he was prosecuting or persecuting these individuals, could have just been over their cannibalistic practices.
No, I truly do think that everything that Paul and those guys was doing was extremely political. Um, I don't think that they had any really true justification for the things which that they were trying to do, other than just the agenda that they were trying to push their beliefs and what he wanted to be accepted. I don't know. I don't really have no understanding from the New Testament, at least, of them directly having those dealings. I can't put that on nobody. Now, you talking about Old Testament, Amalekites, blood drinkers, things of that nature. Um, now we can step into some text where we can actually probably pull out some primaries and see where the people were involved in some crazy stuff.
Yeah, when it comes to those ancient texts, there was a lot of cannibalism. Everybody seems to have been into some type of vampiric practice, and including the pale skinned people as well. Because you got Vlad and a whole bunch of other stories. They even made video games and films and all kinds of stuff regarding that culture. But that was their
Mm,
culture. They still do it to
right.
this day. They call it adrenochrome. It's still part of their culture. You ain't
Hmm.
gonna stop them from drinking no blood. Don't know dead Jesus and no invisible. Oh well, that I'm not gonna. I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop there. My bad. I don't wish to offend, but then again, yeah, when it comes to dissuading people from this particular scientific practice, um, I can't say they can blame Africa for it.
Mm. No, I don't think you can blame Africa for it. You can't blame Africa. You can't blame anybody who wasn't in world power for what's going on in the world. And that's one thing that you can always bind Africa out on. You can't blame Africa for world problems because Africa was never a world superpower to have a worldwide influence on what everybody's doing, politically at least. Now, far as what we have going on over here in America with the ethnogenesis of the African American, everybody's mimicking us. Everybody's mimicking us, but that's just because of the location that we in. We the best people in the best land. That may be a subjective statement, but I don't think it's that subjective because we're the ones in this land that everybody's emulating.
I couldn't agree more. To the point where the swagger jacking is um is beyond obvious, to the point where it's insulting. But that's getting into something else. Now, in regards to some ill will felt from those that are still occupying the continent, um, they seem to have this long-standing angst against Mansa Musa. Have you heard about that?
Said Black America.
No, not Black America. I'm talking about the occupants of Africa,
Uh
the
huh.
non-indigenous occupants. Is that
Mm-hmm.
safe?
Yeah, no problem. And what about them?
They have an issue with Mansa Musa.
Mm. I haven't recorded that either. I haven't seen the true part of Mansa Musa. I knew that Mansa Musa was he was a key figure in Islam. He was a Muslim. He brought millions and millions of dollars, if maybe not billions, maybe worth of gold to those people in Mecca. So they, if anything, owe Mansa Musa a, a high level of respect for his contribution towards the Islamic movement and of course the Islamic riches that they were able to of course retain as well. So if they're taking a squat on Mansa Musa, then they I gotta question their level of Muslimness, if you would. Real talk.
The thing about Mansa was that he was generous to those in need, regardless of their religious affiliation. And
Okay.
that's what Islam is about. Um, and yes, he did have a lot of gold, and as far as the value of everybody else's currency, he drove them down for so long that they're still recovering from Mansa Musa's generosity. Um, and I kind of think that's why they dislike him or whatever is based off of that, and he was about Islam, because the Muslims don't really carry that type of sentiment when it comes to whatever somebody else's belief system is.
Mm-hmm.
And with Africa currently having the large Muslim being the fastest growing religion, as in Islam is no longer expanding itself. You have a undercurrent, like an underwriter um, type of cult following. But that's just my opinion. Never mind.
No, 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 no. You're perfectly fine. Yeah,
But
yeah,
I
yeah.
have a
I see what you're
problem with
saying.
there being you're able to Google 50 million slaves in Africa, and as far as the government, no one's doing anything or even correcting Google or any other source for having that type of information out there. So how do you feel about that?
50 million slaves in Africa.
Yeah.
Whenever you have people who are not indigenous to a land ruling the people who are indigenous to the land, there's always going to be that setup of hierarchy. And when you set up that hierarchy, there's always a chance of slavery. Slavery is a people don't like the harshness of it, but slavery is a human attribute. That's just something that people do in civilizations, especially when there's no laws that prohibit it. Trust me, if they didn't make slavery illegal, we wouldn't. They want to just stop having slaves because we're good people. No, like I'm pretty sure if it was legal and it was popular today, all of our favorite rappers and all of them would have houses full of slaves. So when it comes to 50 million slaves in Africa, 500 million slaves in Africa, I'm pretty like that. That's everywhere, But they want to highlight it to us, and they give it to us, and they give us that type of information, so we want to like. It does something to our culture continuity. It does something to our lifeline. It does something to our connection to Africa. It makes it seem like that, like damn, like I'm a lose. I'm already losing here, a quote unquote low class citizen here, second hand citizen here, already don't belong here, ain't got no flag, just a lost individual, ain't got no nation as the African American. We ain't got no credit line, ain't got no military unit, just over here. Ain't got nowhere I can go back to that I actually know. Mexican, he go back to Mexico. Australian man go back to Australia. Cuban man go back to Cuba. African American man gotta trust 23andMe and all of these other European institutions that were created. And who knows if they're giving these individuals the right information. So
Facts.
when they do that and they show you Africans getting beat up on the continent, it's like it does something to your psyche as an African here. It's like, damn, at least I'm doing better than them over there. At least I ain't that. At least I'm, but that's not the reality. All Africans, 50 million Africans, is not even a stain on the continent of Africa. We're talking about a continent that has to hold over 1 billion people. This is the largest continent. 50 million out of it. If it happened, it happened, and it's going to continue to happen. Pretty sure you can go to the next continent, and you're going to see 20 million African slaves. I wonder what's the amount of millions of slaves in Asia, but they don't want to highlight that to us because that has no affinity for the mission that they're trying to do over here. I hope I wasn't too long-winded with that answer, but that's just my breakdown.
I mean, that was honest because I know a lot of people weren't born with the genocide of Rwanda. Not telling my age, but when that happened, I felt that. And I was troubled at the fact that no one paid it any attention, nor do they commemorate all the victims of that frenzied attack. Um, you know, one African against another African.
Oh my God! It's funny that you brought that up because I also had over at the HOK did a very in depth breakdown. Title of it is "The Curse of the Hermetic Theory," where I actually went in on that, and that was all instituted by the Belgians. Those Europeans came in with their religion and told the you had the what was the actual names of the people. Man, I hate that I forget the names of
The
them.
Tutsis and the
The
Hutus.
Tutsi and the Hutu. They were told first, they told the Hutu that they were Hamites and that the Tutsi were just African. This was when they was back when the European was saying that they were also Hamites. People don't know this. See, people don't know this for real. They so caught up in what's going on with kind of society, like in the IACPK today, that they don't understand that before they were trying to delegate European to African, Europeans were saying that they were, Hamites to African, Europeans were saying that they were Hamites, saying that they built the pyramids, saying that all of those great African cultures were due to tall, light-skinned, Caucasoid Hamites. That was literally the description. So when they came, they told the Hutu, like, y'all part of us. And because y'all part of us, y'all supposed to enslave the Tutsi. So they imposed it. And they were going at them. And they had these church fathers, and they was teaching this stuff all in their schools, man. Teaching this superiority, inferiority doctrine to these people. And they ain't never heard this crap in their life. They ain't never read a Bible in their life. But they brought it over there with and they brought these institutions, and they accepted it because they had the firepower to make them accept it, of course, as well. Late years down the line, they flipped the roles, told the Tutsi that they the ones, and that the Hutu is who bogus now. And that's because the power had split within their cultural dynamic, where the Hutu wasn't really doing a thing, and the Tutsi were becoming more progressive. So here comes the Europeans, like, oh, because I see the progression in you, now I'm going to tell you that you're this, and you need to go at them. Now these people murdering each other. Mass genocide. The largest genocide, recent genocide that we've had. But nobody talk about it, like you said. Nobody, and I never even watched Hotel Rwanda. I never knew that that's what it was about. Yeah.
I haven't watched it either.
But they said that was about a couple. One was a Tutsi and one was a Hutu. Now I almost gotta watch it.
I wonder if they got that on Netflix.
Yeah, I always overlooked Hotel Rwanda. Always overlooked it. But now that I got older and I've done my history just going through it and then find out that that was about that, I'm like, oh, how I missed that? How can I miss that?
How did I miss it?
Yeah.
Or maybe I just didn't want to see it. I would rather read about it. I was one of those that had to read the weekly tabloid. I was that nosy. Um you mentioned the dog. I was gonna look up I
The
was trying to
church
see if
father?
this history book got that in there. Because it goes up until 2000, and I didn't look it up in this particular book on the genocide of Rwanda and why it's called a genocide. And it's always been about the woman, right?
Yeah, right, right.
That's why most wars are even fought is over the woman. And apparently, when it comes to the Israelites, that's what they're calling themselves. Um, you have You have the men taking these people women.
Of course you do. But
Did
that's
they
what their
not do
culture is all
that?
about.
Because when I read about Shaka Zulu and well, he was a genocidal maniac. He was crazy at the end, but he was driven crazy. His people drove him crazy. Your people can drive you crazy.
Yeah,
And yeah,
yeah, yeah. I mean, look at Huey P. Newton.
what did he do?
I mean, you talking about going crazy within the struggle, you know. Oh, Huey P. Newton, he suffered from that same thing as well, where his mental began to decline and he began like aggressive and he began like even abuse Black Panther Party members, and he even began like to sell drugs in the street, and he had his chapter of Black Panther Party also out there selling drugs as well. He kind of like lost his mind later on in the Black Panther Party revolution. Yeah, when he got out of prison.
He got out and went crazy, or was there a lot of inside job happenings to him that went
Yeah,
unreported?
and that was also speculated as well that maybe somebody may have slipped him something that made his mental decline as well, because the Huey P. Newton that everybody was saying free was not the Huey P. Newton that emerged out of the prison.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised because he was smart. He was the one that knew the law, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty much where my knowledge of him stops because everything else is rumor. And I know that, within that infrastructure, as far as the struggle is concerned, it's always an inside job.
Yeah, going all the way down to Fred Hampton and him being murdered by the CIA. What do you I want to speak to that as well. Since we just here and we're talking about Africans and we're talking about the history of Africans, things of that nature, we gotta like, how do you feel? Look at me interviewing an interviewer, but how do you feel about the CIA and FBI deliberately not only murdering but systematically crippling the Black conscious community and our leaders, like a Fred Hampton, like a Martin Luther King, and then go the insulting route and make a movie and show you exactly how they did it?
Well, I can't speak for all of the people that you named, but like we discussed earlier on Martin Luther King,
Mm.
he helped Margaret Sanger write eugenics. He called
Mm.
his own people feeble-minded.
Mm.
So when it comes to these people, once you take a deeper dive on their character, they become a disappointment. And then
Mm.
you're stuck thinking, what would I have done or how would I have handled the situation? Because I definitely wouldn't to delete them. But yeah,
Okay.
as far as those intelligent agencies, those are definitely there to, like, they work like a check and balance system within the struggle.
Mm. What I observed is that, and I brought this out, I believe, in the charismatic theory. Yeah, I did in charismatic theory build as well, is that the Marshall, the U.S. Marshall system that we have, the like all that going way back to even the times of like Black Wall Street and before, uh, even back to when we had like little small towns and we was living like that with just the sheriff. What we had was what we had. Give me 1 second. I apologize. Was that the Marshall system was set up for the free slaves? That's what it was set up for. It was set up not to catch. It was also designed to catch free slaves and make them slaves again, but also catch slaves that were had ran away, like a Harriet Tubman, things of that nature. That's
Mhm.
what the law, that's what these officers and all that, that's what they was always used for. That's what the marshal was doing. He'd come get you. And he'd even come get you if you bought your freedom. And if he said that you wasn't free, you wasn't free. So when it comes down to the CIA and the FBI, gotta even think about the way that they recruit. They ain't doing standard screening the way that your local police department and all that is. Nah, they looking at who your granddaddy was, who his granddaddy was, what you got going on in your family. What is your ancestral um what is your ancestral habits? What do your people do? What are their tendencies? And then they come in like that. So if you don't believe that these all high-ranking officers, FBI agents, CIA agents are not descendants of the KKK and those same martial institutions that were set up to capture the free slave, then you got another thing coming. That's why you get a J. Edgar Hoover up in there, and he's going to talk, and he's talking about we're going to stop the rise of the Black Messiah. And that was never revamped. They never took that out of their memorandum. That's still in place today. If I was to actually get the people riled up and going today and have people moving in the street and I was talking about Black revolution, I'd be gone. Or they'd say that I was out here graping people or messing around with children, and then they'll crucify me like that. But this is the things that they do to systematically stop the rise of a Black Messiah. It really bothers me, and it's very cringy to believe that the very government and the agencies that you would think are supposed to protect you, make sure that you're okay, are the ones that are destroying you in the background systematically.
Hmm.
These are the things that's going on. All because of why? Dun, 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 racist European science. So just go back to the original topic that we was having. Is there such thing as African science? Absolutely. You know, but I don't have that much time left, sister. I gotta be
All right.
going. But I really do appreciate this. Shout out to the
No
Ring of
problem.
Fire. Shout out to you, Sumerian. Brother Ashe, Bomb Squad Ashe, coming to you live from the Rhetoric Frontier, stationed over at the Ring of Fire at the Winner's Circle. Shout out God Energy. Shout out to Brother Fire, Wild Mac over on the live stream. Um, Shout out to you, Sumerian. Shout out the whole HOK, sign other studios, things of that nature. Y'all know how we doing it. Y'all know how we rocking, man. I appreciate you.
All right, Dan. It was good having you. And yeah, that's a wrap.
All right.
Thank you so much for stopping by.
No doubt. Ain't no doubt.